I love a good stripper, right?
Yeah, actually, I just want to work
Exactly,
with the gays. You're
yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah. Now, fast forward, I'm in a G-string and pasties. And
Hey, baby steps.
Exactly.
And if you put a dog mask on, what's different from Halloween?
What happens in there?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the internet, thank God. In like a beer closet, like our ass pressed against a ice machine.
And they're like, oh, that's gay. I'm like, what's gay?
I call myself the old whore on the block. Like, I'm still here, still kicking.
I was like, I want all the guys to obsess over me, too.
Seriously. And then also the, like, homoeroticism of pro wrestling,
sure.
too. Like, why not throw some glitter on it and fucking show it off?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, do something.
Right.
Like, no, I want to be this bitch.
Right.
I don't want to do her. I want to be her.
This episode of Primary Care is sponsored by Regiette Health. More than just an ED treatment.
I'm Tyler.
Yeah, so I'm Jasper St. James, and I am a burlesque performer and producer with the Pasty Pops Burlesque Review in San Antonio. Wow. And I'm also a co-owner of the Sexuality Institute in San Antonio, Texas as well. So
Awesome.
Growing up, I've always been super fascinated by, so like I remember being a kid and like driving past like the adult like gentlemen's clubs, right?
Yeah.
And I was always asked my dad, like, what happens in there?
Right.
Why does it say gentlemen's club? Why is it only for gentlemen? One thing, I'm already questioning gender, but two, I'm already like, what happens in there?
Yeah.
No one would ever tell me. And then, of course, the internet, thank God, found out what it was. And I was like, okay, this is cool. But of course, like, grew up Catholic, don't talk about sex or even any type of expression of that at all, right? So it's all repressed. Move away. I go crazy.
Of course.
I was like, let me hit up these places. I want to see what happens, right?
Yeah.
Growing up, too, like in my teen years, I was always fascinated by like Betty Page, even Marilyn Monroe's like Playboy cover, you know, Playboy issue and stuff like that. So like that 1950s pinup type of vibe was always something that kind of spoke to me, that I was like, this is so cool. Like these women were doing something that was so provocative for the time, but now you see it and it's so elegant, right? And it's so like tasteful. It wasn't until a friend of mine wanted to do burlesque. And she was like, I want to audition. Yeah. So I was like, cool, I will help you with whatever I can. So I helped her with her costume, choreography. And growing up, I was a singer. She was learning to do her numbers. And we decided, like, well, let's partner up. So I would sing while she would strip.
That's cool.
It didn't last very long. We did like a couple of numbers like that. And then I was like, I kind of want to do this alone. You know?
Yeah.
So at the time, I wasn't really comfortable with like how much skin I wanted to show.
Sure.
So I would strip down to a tank top and like boxer shorts. And I was like, this is provocative enough for me. Now, fast forward, I'm in a G-string and pasties. And
hey, baby steps.
Exactly. Exactly. It was a progression for sure.
Yeah.
When I started, we were performing in a small little country bar. The stage
a
was
country
about,
bar.
Yeah. Stage was about half the size of this room. Like, it was just...
Was it in San Antonio, your first performance?
Mm-hmm. We're getting dressed in like a beer closet, like our ass pressed against a ice machine. Like, it was myself. There was 2 other male performers at the time. And then just a bunch of girls who wanted to do it, right? And shake their titties.
Why not?
So we were the weird ones, right? No one was accustomed to having a male burlesque performer. Wow. But it was what stole the show.
Yeah.
And it was what made the show.
Right.
Yeah. For me, it was really hit or miss, right? So some audiences, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get beat up after this.
Sure.
Or they're going to celebrate it and it's going to be really cool.
Either way, lots of adrenaline for you.
Yes. Some nights I was like, I don't feel comfortable. I'm not going to do it. So I wouldn't do it some nights because I was just like, you can feel the vibe. Like you can feel the energy. But 90% of the time, it was great. Yeah. It was kind of punk rock, if you will. We were doing this in so many underground places. Anywhere that would allow a stripper to take their clothes off, we would do it. Yeah. And then we kind of I decided, well, let's do our own troupe, right? Let's create something. Because at the time, classic burlesque was the thing. Right. Like this pinup style. Sure. And although some of our performers really resonate with that, it wasn't for everyone. Sure. So I wanted to do stuff that was campy and funny, and because I think humor is sexy.
For sure.
And so I would incorporate a lot of humor into my acts. I was just kind of like, there needs to be a melting pot, a group that's like a melting pot of all these different elements. Yeah. And it worked. It worked. And so we created the Pasty Pops. And and just so for reference, a pasty pop is when a burlesque performer loses their pasty. And so nipple is exposed. Sure. So that is what we refer to as a pasty pop. And that's kind of like our vibe. Like we're just kind of like that accident that happened. And we're just like, hey, we're here.
So how many of you are there?
Right now, there are 5 of us, and we're kind of like a whole little unit, and it's really fun. It's just, they're like second family to me.
For sure.
And so it's really cool to just kind of have that community.
Yeah. Are they all male or mixed or all female?
No, so I'm the only male performer in the group, and then the rest are all cis women.
Gotcha.
But we vary in shapes, sizes.
Yeah.
Like, it's so beautiful. And I think that's kind of the thing that we're seeing, especially with burlesque. It's very Instagrammable, if you will, to have this like look, right? A certain body type. And when you come to one of our shows, you see real people doing this and feeling confident in their own skin and showing it off and decorating it, you know?
Right. You know, I think most of us in Florida, there's a lot of gentlemen's clubs as well. So I saw a lot of them too. And I was always very shy to ask my parents about things that I thought that would make them uncomfortable. I could pretty much pick that up pretty quickly growing up in church and things like that. But I do wonder if maybe creating this sort of bubble that we put kids in is not that healthy for them. Maybe allow them to ask questions. I mean, wouldn't you want your kid to come to you asking, hey, I saw this somewhere. Can you explain it to me, as a parent, instead of the kid going to Google and finding maybe X-rated content that they could have missed because they're maybe not ready for, and then the parents in control of the dialogue, right? So I have an example. We recently had a guest on who does pup play, and he was talking about what it was, and I had never experienced it, and I put on a hood, and I got some feedback from people saying, oh, you know, this is really cool. It's to be open-minded, but this is certainly something you shouldn't do around families or kids. And I'm like, well, it's a dog mask, and if you put a dog mask on, what's different from Halloween? And and why can't you just explain it to your kids? Like, this is something that adults do to dress up, and that's all you have to say. You know, you're as a parent, I would want my kid to be exposed to it and come to me.
The parents themselves aren't educated.
Right.
It's all generational, right? So like, we can trace it back to where it all started. They got it from their parents. They got it from their parents, you know, like, especially too, if you're Hispanic or, you know, grew up religious, like my queerness was an issue. The fact that I took my clothes off was an issue, you know, like, it was something that we don't talk about, right? And I think it's just because our parents were not educated themselves, so they weren't equipped to handle that conversation. If your child does come up to you and ask a question, even if you don't know the answer, it's okay to tell your kid, I don't know the answer, but like, let me look it up and then figure out, how do I explain this to my child?
Instead of the we don't talk about Bruno approach.
Thank you. Exactly.
I always cram a Disney reference anywhere I can.
I mean, we love Encanto. It's perfect.
Absolutely.
You know?
Completely agree.
Like, like, it's just, it's so crazy that, you know, I mean, I think like, had I had that relationship with my parents to be able to tell them, like, hey, like, what is this? You know, and then be not like, shield your eyes. Don't look at that. You know?
Because then what do you want as a kid?
You want it more.
Look, exactly. And that feeling doesn't go away, right? Maybe in your front of your parents or for years you hide it, but in the back of your head you're always wondering, why did I shield my eyes? What was I missing out on? And then first time you have freedom, you're going to jump into it, of course, to want to learn and to experience. And if maybe you had learned before, you could have educated yourself a little bit better. I think about my queerness a lot as well, and not being able to feel comfortable talking about being gay to my family. And then when the opportunity presented itself for me to live authentically behind their backs, I was doing things that certainly could have been dangerous or risky, and I could have had a much probably smoother experience if I had just had the education or at least someone to talk to. And so it's really interesting. And it's also interesting you talk about, as a young person, already kind of being drawn to these sort of sexual type, you know, and I can sort of relate to that too. I remember as a kid, I always was really obsessed with Playboy, and I'm homosexual, so it's like, why am I interested in Playboy? But let me tell
you about that. So when I was in first grade, and you know, they took the whole class to the bathroom. It was bathroom break. We all go to the bathroom. I remember the boys, we were all in the bathroom, and they would ask every single boy, do you like Playboy or Playgirl? Me not knowing the difference.
I remember this.
I remember being like, well, I'm a boy, so I should like girls. So I said Playgirl. It was over. I was the homo.
Was that the moment that it happened?
For them, I was still like, what the fuck does this mean?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, because I think I have my earliest experience of being called gay, and I remember I was in first grade and I had crossed my legs. And they were like, you're crossing your legs? And I didn't even know it was happening. And I'm like, I guess. And they're like, oh, that's gay. I'm like, what's gay?
You're like, what does that mean? Does it mean I'm happy?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it, right? But it's just funny, we have those moments growing up, we're like, oh my God, they know. It's out.
Exactly. It's like a turning point, and you're just like, And even to yourself, you don't even know if you're out yet.
Right.
But you're just like, I fucked up.
Right.
But also, I'm not wrong.
Right.
Like,
yeah. And it's almost like at the point too when I was called out for cross-dressing, I'm like, am I gay? I mean, that sounds right.
Yeah, exactly. You're like,
I fit
you're
that.
onto something, bitch. You're onto something.
And it's funny, the Playgirl or Playboy, excuse me, magazines and things that I would be exposed to in preteen and teenagers, I always saw these women as super powerful because all of the guys would be drooling over her and obsessing over her, and I'm like, I want all the guys to obsess over me too. Seriously. There's a lot of power there, right? And of course, I used to doodle like women, like Playgirl models, and my mom was like, "Oh, he's straight. Look, he's drawing naked women." I'm like, "No, this is what I want to look like.
I want to be this bitch. Right? I don't want to do her. I want to be her."
Yes, I want to attach myself to that type of power, you know?
Yeah.
Hey folks, my podcast Primary Care is sponsored by Rougiette Ready, the latest pharmaceutical advancement in erectile dysfunction. This is a sublingual compounded treatment using 3 ingredients, sildenafil, tadalafil, and apomorphine, and it works up to 5 times faster than pills and chewables. We give you a promo code Primary Care for 20% off your first order and free shipping. Now, let's get back to the content.
I was also really into like pro wrestling.
Yeah, for sure.
So wrestling in the 90s was like in early 2000s. That was the sweet spot of pro wrestling.
For sure.
So I remember there was a definitive moment that I was like, it's kind of like the Playboy stuff. There was a female wrestler, Sable.
Okay.
She took off her top on one pay-per-view event and she had these handprints on her tits. And the power she had. I remember being in the room with my dad and all his friends, and they were just drooling over her and wanting her. And I was like, her showing her titties.
Right, that's it.
Did all this and caused such a commotion. And I was like, and then also the like homoeroticism of pro wrestling too. Like I remember Shawn Michaels was on Playgirl, you know, and that whole issue. Like I remember my mom wanting that issue so bad because she was obsessed with him. So it's like, but like, I don't know. I think so that kind of was like in me seeing like the power that the body can have, right? That exposing the body, but exposing it in a way it's like you can have the perfect body.
Sure.
But if there's no confidence behind it,
right? And no joy
behind it, it's just there, right?
Yeah.
And so like as I started doing burlesque, I wasn't very comfortable with what I wanted to show because I felt like I wasn't at my best.
Right.
And I was like, so let me just get to a point where I feel more comfortable showing more. That point there was no definitive moment where I was like, my body is my body. I like, it's healthy. It's getting me up in the morning. I'm able to still do what I want to do. Yeah. Like, why not throw some glitter on it and fucking show it off?
Yeah.
You know?
I agree.
When I first started doing, I didn't do makeup. I didn't do any of that because I wanted to kind of present this like masculine presenting type of performance, but it never really felt right. It wasn't until I started doing the makeup and kind of blending genders a little bit that I was like, this feels more like me. And so it almost kind of became like an alter ego. And now it's me. Yeah. You know, like it's just morphed into who I am as a person. And now it's just like an extension of that. Like this is casual wear.
I love it.
You know,
yeah.
But it's really empowering. And I think a lot of people get into burlesque for the wrong reasons. They think that it is going to be this empowering factor. And it can be. Sure. It can be really transformational for some people. But at the end of the day, too, it's also entertainment. Yeah. So you have to be an entertainer or have some form of that type of background in your system to really sell it. Because I've seen so many performers who have the most beautiful costumes, the most beautiful body, but they are boring as shit. Yeah. And I'm just like, do something. Do something that's going to make me, like, even a sparkle in your eye. Like, sometimes there's just nothing going on back there. And it ruins the illusion. And I think when I think about like people like Betty Page, Marilyn Monroe, Tempest Storm, Dixie Evans, like some of the great performers of the past, they had that twinkle in their eye, that mischievousness of like, I'm doing something that is going to be kind of naughty, but it's done with a wink and a smile, you know? And I think that that's what sells it. I think that's what has to be there before anything else. The confidence journey, yes, of course, but I think at the end of the day, it's still also entertainment.
I recall, at least when I was in my early teens and in the early 2000s, I feel like the narrative of a stripper or someone who was performing in that capacity, there was a sense of desperation.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, this poor person, they have to do this for money. And that was sort of the narrative in a lot of TV shows we would see, a lot of movies, like they couldn't get a job dancing in the show, so they have to go to the strip club down the street so they can like pay their bills.
Very Noe Malone and Showgirls.
You exactly got my reference.
Yeah.
But like poor Nomi, right? But I feel like in the last 20 years, it's really changed. Like we've seen a lot more empowerment. I think of people like Cardi B, who is obviously one of the most successful rappers out there now, and started, you know, from reality TV, but before that was, you know, a stripper.
Right.
And we see that this doesn't have to be a desperation type career, and it probably never was, right? There were many people out there who've been doing this for hundreds and thousands of years. This is not a new concept, for power, you know, for feeling empowered, for yes, probably some sort of compensation, but because they're entertainers and they're performers. And like you mentioned too, I think people go into it for different reasons. Certainly there's a financial aspect that draws a lot of people to it, the empowerment, the entertainment value, but then I think you can kind of tell also on stage what someone's there for, right? Are they there for themselves or for the audience?
Right.
And are they a true performer? And they don't necessarily have to be, but I assume it shows in their work. And obviously it's not the easiest thing to do to perform in front of hundreds of people, or even just a group of 20 people, because they suck your energy, right? They're there to be entertained, and so you're there to provide that for them. And so I'm sure you've seen people kind of come and go through this. People kind of jump in to see jump right back out.
I've been doing this for 14 years, going on my 15th year of doing this. I call myself the old whore on the block. Like I'm still here, still kicking. But I've seen it to where people like get into it, right? And they go hard, right out the gate. And they're trying to do it the best they can. Right. And then just fizzles out.
Yeah.
You know, burlesque back in the day started out as poor man's theater. You know, like before then, it was a parody. Burlesque started by men dressing up as women and making fun of pop culture, making fun of society, making fun of government.
Right.
So burlesque at its core was humorous. It wasn't until Lydia Thompson and the British Blondes came to America and incorporated the striptease. Wow. And that was in the 1920s. And then Depression happened and burlesque theaters became popular because it was a form of entertainment that people could afford to go and do. Wow. Right? So they could go to a theater, see a comedy show, they could get, you know, a line of chorus girls and then a main strip. Wow. You know, so it was this entertainment feature, and it did its thing. I mean, Tempest Storm dated Elvis Presley, you know, these huge stars. They were household names. Right. So they weren't really seen as deviants. Right. You know, they were celebrated as celebrities. Mm-hmm. Of course, still America, still very conservative. They were like, no, don't go to those places, you know, but it still happens now.
You're right.
Don't go to the drag shows. Don't go to, you know, but, you know, like they're rumors. Yeah. But come 60s and 70s, burlesque kind of died down, and we were introduced to go-go dancing. Right. And then strip clubs came up. And so burlesque kind of just fizzled out, and the popularity of strip clubs came up. What was funny is that a lot of people thought that strippers were a quick get on the pole type of thing. Right. But the funny thing is, you could actually go to these strip clubs and see a lot of burlesque acts happening in those strip clubs because they didn't have a place to go. Once the theaters were gone, where did they go? Option. Yeah. Right. So I've been very fortunate to know some of these legends, you know, personally, and hear their stories of how they transitioned from headlining a theater to having to work as a go-go dancer because it's the only way they could get work and continue to do what they do. And they were stars of the strip club because they weren't just going out in a G-string, they were doing a full production. And, you know, it's really, really just fascinating. And I love a good stripper. Right? Yeah. Like you can tell when there's a good stripper, they know what they're doing, right? They got it down. I feel like they have so much power. Yeah. Because they have the power, power on your wallet, right? They got your wallet. Right. But the way they command your attention with their body, their movements, their eyes. Right. Eye contact is huge. And so that's something that I actually see some burlesque performers that they look past the audience. I'm like, look at them. Yeah. Like, fuck them in their eyes and fuck them in their hearts. Like, you got to get them there. If you put yourself under the lights, if you put yourself on a platform, right, people are already looking at you.
Right. Engage,
exactly. And otherwise, if you're just up there and you're not looking at them, it feels kind of cringy, kind of like I feel awkward for you.
Yeah, so it's funny. I have this one experience with one of my favorite artists is Britney Spears.
Yes.
I mean, I was born in 1990, so that's
nice,
it's a part of being in that age.
We'll beg to differ. I'm Team Christina over here.
That's great. That's more of a vocalist. I get it. That's my best friend.
Loved her Dirty era.
Yes.
Hello, it speaks to who I am. There we go.
Yes.
But anyways, continue.
I am obsessed with Christina as well. But I remember watching Britney in concert many times, and she always looks beyond the audience. And she's had a lot of things happen to her, so I totally get that. But it was like you almost feel like as an audience member that the person doesn't want to be there.
Exactly.
And so then you do feel a little cringy, a little like, is this person actually happy to be doing what they're doing? And maybe they are. Just that's the perception you get when someone's like not really trying to connect with the audience.
I feel like in her younger years,
I'm sure she was much more.
You could see it in her eyes, like she wanted it. That hunger was there, and the industry just really did her wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine being in a conservatorship where you have all of your rights taken away as if you're an Alzheimer's patient in their 80s. But
exactly,
that's
and also just like
it's a whole nother podcast,
right? The life of Britney Spears.
Oh my gosh, that can be our.
You should totally
next
do that.
Episode. That would be. I'd have a lot to say.
But her story, it's really sad, but also like the fact that she got to where she did so quickly and so young. It's a testament to her talent, right? And she has talent.
Yeah.
But I think the industry just put her in this box so quickly.
Yeah.
And they really messed her up. Disney star who was on Wizards of Waverly Place.
Yes, he passed.
Dan Benson. No, Dan Benson. He's now an OnlyFans content creator.
Oh, really? Huh.
He's amazing. Like
Good
his
for
content
him.
work is great.
Yeah. Oh, I'll have to look him up.
Yeah, you should. Lots of shibari, rope tying. It's really cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But he got a lot of flack because coming from Disney.
Right.
And now switching over to OnlyFans.
Yeah.
He didn't have a big role at the time.
Right.
But
still being
people
that
recognize him from Wizards of Waverly Place. And I mean, the fact that now he's on OnlyFans doing this stuff, people are like, whoa, that's crazy. But I was listening to a podcast with him on it. It was him and Christy Carlson Romano.
I love her.
Love her too. Kim Possible.
Kim Possible
Stevens,
all the way. Yes.
A Disney gal.
Icons.
Yes. But like they were just kind of talking about how, that jump, right? Like how it was so drastic and how some people view it as a negative. And he was just kind of like, it's so empowering to me, like I get to do my own stuff.
Right.
Put out my own, like this level of or this feeling of confidence.
Yes.
That just comes with. It's very freeing.
Absolutely. And it's so funny you mentioned that because, so I have an OnlyFans. Mm-hmm. It's quite boring. And I literally have that written on the headline this is a very boring OnlyFans because I literally don't show very much, but I feel like I'm in drag right now. Like this is hyper like masculine type of clothes that I wear and way that I present. To me, it's where I feel like I'm comfortable. Kind of like when I talk to a drag queen and they're like, this is what makes me feel like I'm performing. I feel like I'm performing too, like on my daily basis. Like I never really turn it off.
Yeah.
I feel like as a kid, this is always how I wanted to look and present, but I was always really feminine, which I don't mind now. Right. I'm starting to embrace that too, but I was always really skinny and really feminine. And so now that I'm really confident in my appearance and have worked really hard on it, I post a lot of pictures online in a Speedo and I'm a physician. So people find that very confusing. I have an OnlyFans and I'm a doctor. How does this work? And I'm like, you can also have it all. Yeah. You can also not limit yourself. And so it's not necessarily a sexual thing for me. It's more so just like empowering and confidence building, and it makes me feel good about myself. And there is a time limit on the way that I look. One day I'll be in my 70s and 80s and being able to look back and be like, wow, this hard work that I put in to look this way and feel confident in myself.
As a queer person, you're always having to create a seat at the table.
Yes.
I'm sure even in the medical industry, there's people who are going to see you as like, oh, so now you're a gay doctor.
Right. Exactly.
So you only work with the gays.
Yeah. And at first I was like, no, I can do it all. And then I'm like, actually, I just want to work with the gays. You're exactly right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly like, but again, you're creating your own path.
Exactly.
They, especially at a place where they want to put you in a box so quickly, you know, and
I'm just so thankful that you took time out of your schedule to come and hang with me, and we would love to have you back.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime.
So much fun.
Look forward to next time.
Add us on Instagram at Primary Care Pod. Catch up on past episodes and don't miss out on new ones. Subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify at Primary Care Pod.